Okay, we'll begin. We're holding Siman Kuv Daled, Din Arba Shanim Tzabiyayin B'Shecha, an incident where a mouse was found in wine or in beer, and this can happen with other shrotzim, this can happen with other insects, crawling creatures. It doesn't have to be beer or wine, and we're going to see the various differences. If this ever comes up, we need to know if there is a difference between other liquids. And so we'll review a little bit what we did on Tuesday, and we'll try to finish the Siman. We're dealing with a situation which is very unique here. By now we know how bittul works approximately. We know that there are certain limitations of bittul. Certain things require larger amounts for bittul. And of course these are all midrabanan. In the past Siman, we dealt, however, with a situation where an iser that falls in is pogum, or makes the tafshil pogum. And once something becomes pogum, to some extent pogum, or very pogum, there's no real hana from it. And since this is not basar b'chalav, where we need to prohibit or limit even shelo kederech hana osan, in any way you cannot benefit from it, there's some leniency. There's a leniency that says that, listen, b'di'evet, of course, it's all b'di'evet, if this is what happened, it may be mutter, this mixture. What do you mean it may be mutter? We're not saying that the Isser Be'ein is mutter. Isser Be'ein is never mutter, unless, of course, it's completely nisrach, that it's not royal achilas kelev, completely unedible. All right. So we're not saying that it's that, because that's obvious. We're saying that it's a little pogum, as we saw in the last Siman. Even a little pogum is enough to be poigim the tafshel and to give us a new halacha, that we no longer need shishim, that even roiv heter would be sufficient because it's a little pogum.
In this particular, unlike what we preach, the thing itself has to be pogum, or are we still okay, but it's pogum, the mixture?
Either one. That's what we learned in the last Siman. This Siman is a little bit different because of the various different scenarios. We're still going to deal with pgimis, but from a different angle. But that's basically how pogum works. And even though there's other shitas and other poskim that are not as lenient in pgimo and how much it has to be pogum, but everybody agrees that to some extent pogum renders the tafshil mutter if you at least have roiv b'di'evet. Now, what would you say to a dover aser that is pogum in itself? It's not in a tarovis, it's not in a mixture. Can I have it? The answer is no. You cannot have an Isser Be'ein. If it's a little pogum, doesn't taste good, it's mo'us, disgusting, and mo'us is like pogum, right? Pogum meaning it's not necessarily rotten, it's just distasteful. Right? Yeah.
But that's not in this one.
That's not it, right. Well, you may want to change wine. You may want to get yourself another bottle of wine. But that's not an Isser problem. Here, you see something that is pogum. You obviously can't have it because you're not allowed to have any Isser, even if it's pogum. The Torah forbids certain shrotzim. Torah forbids certain insects, certain reptiles, certain things that are pogum, that we know, as we're going to see, that by nature they're pogum. Their taste is mo'us, disgusting. And still it's usur, because that's what the Torah forbids, regardless of the flavor. So when does it make a difference? In other words, that there is a possibility for it to become mutter in a tarovis, right? When it is mixed. In a mixture, forget about the amount, just stick to roiv, it's simple. Once it's in a tarovis, it has a different status. And if it's by itself, it still retains the original issue of the Torah, even if it's pogum. So pogum can help me only in a tarovis. It can never help me really by itself. Okay? Now that we know that pogum helps if it's in a tarovis, what would be the din if the insect is there, shredded? Forget about beer right now. Okay? And I can't get it out. I can't filter it out. It's cut up into pieces. Because if I could filter it out, then I need to. No matter how much I have. If I have a way of filtering it out,
it's called be'ein.
Yeah,
it's called nicker.
Exactly. No matter how much I have keneged. Oh, it's bottle. No, but you can filter it out. You don't have the heter. Bottle means I have no way of removing the isser, right? Therefore I use bitul. I don't see it. I can't get it out. I can't identify it, right? So I apply halachas of bitul. Well, that's pretty simple. But what does that tell me? That if it's there and I cannot filter it in the normal way, under certain circumstances, the bitul will not help me. What would those circumstances be that the bitul will not help me? It's pogrom, it's a sheretz, whatever. There's roiv. I can't filter it out, but still it's asur. Why? Because even though I can't take it out, doesn't mean that it's not nicker. Just because you don't have the ability to take it out, it doesn't mean that it's not nicker. There is still a possibility that something can be discernible, borrowing your term, even though they're small, minute pieces. We're not talking about microscopic right now. We're talking about, somehow you can detect it. Detect it, according to the Gra, even if you can detect it by a touch, it's called detecting it. You don't have to see it. But anyway, there is that possibility that it would not be bottled. Why? Because it falls under the category of Isser Nicker. As we discussed on Tuesday, there are various shitas, poiskim, that hold that any Isser, not just shrotzim, any Isser that is somewhat discernible and I cannot filter it out by filtration, it will not be bottled afilu be'elef. Because it's there. It's Nicker. Now I'm going to add a detail that we may have not clarified enough. However, assuming this Isser is a type of meat, whether it's a bug meat or some other Isser, and there's other meat in that dish, other than rice and vegetables, there is other meat in that tafshil, then even if it's discernible and I can't filter it out, I will still apply the din of bottle in Yovish b'Yovish.
Provided it's not be'ein.
No, even if, provided of course it's not be'ein.
Right.
But I'm saying even if it's somewhat discernible.
Right.
As far, even discernible not in be'ein. Discernible meaning that I can't filter it out. I see it there, but I can't really get...
If it end up in one's mouth, one would be able to...
I can even see it, but I don't know which one is usher.
Uh-huh.
Okay? I have pieces that are just like it.
That I'm with you.
Or, I can't really see it, but I know it's there and I have a hard, either one.
Right.
And I have a hard time filtering it out. But I have other meat like it.
It would be like it, discerning this, you're discerning that.
Exactly, yes.
It's going to be similar.
Then I would apply for that meat a din of bitul of yavish b'yavish and roiv. Tam, if tam is a problem, if it is, then of course I need shishim in the tafshil can negate the tam, the plita. If the tam is a problem, but here it's pogum, so the tam may not be a problem. But I have a problem with the isur be'ein if it's nicker somehow. We're not talking about mamish be'ein because then you can just take it out. We're talking about be'ein because it's discernible. It somehow cannot be filtered. It's there. So if there is other meat just like it, then it would be batal according to everybody. Beroiv, that is. Is that clear? Yeah. All right? That's clear. The chidush is, however, and this is the big chidush of this siman, which you will not find anywhere else, because it's not discussed anywhere else, that a piece of isur that was minced, shredded, very small pieces, that is in a liquid, or in a tafshil, or something, and it's not completely liquefied, because if something is completely liquefied, it has been transformed to a liquid. Then it's lach belach. Okay? So we're not talking about liquefied. We're talking about the situation where it's discernible, it's different.
So it's either yavish belach or yavish b'yavish?
No, it's yavish, but not of its kind.
But none of it's...
Right. Which is min beta, minoy or whatever, yeah. It's discernible, in other words, it's still that it cannot be filtered out. The mechaber says that it will always remain asur. That you cannot apply bittul to it. It's there. It's there. There's nothing to be mevatel it. There's nothing, its own min to be mevatel it. It's just like having potatoes in liquid. The two are very different. One does not cancel out the other.
So you just said if it's with other meat such that I cannot identify with the heter meat and with the isur meat.
Right.
The mechaber's din would apply here that since discernible and just
No,
confused. No,
it would not. No, That would be a typical case of bitul in yovesh b'yovesh in roiv.
So which case is it where the Mechaber does
The Mechaber's shita and the Rishonim that he follows hold that whenever you have only this isser amongst other heter, but the heter is not of its kind.
So it's
Right. Like a yovesh in a lach, but it's shredded. You can't, it's all there.
But
right?
if you'll find anything that's not liquid, it will be from the Isser.
Right. And even if it's minute, less than dosha, by the way, even less than the size of a lentil, it would be equivalent to chatzi shir, also min Torah. Chatzi shir doesn't necessarily have to be chatzi shir, even less. It's also, you can't have lechatchila, a piece of isser that's this small of bacon. Can I, just a little piece? Less than a kazayis? Less than a half a kazayis? A small one. No, you can't.
Unless it's grinded.
No, also not.
You can't.
Even a small piece you can't have of isser lechatchila, right? It's also.
So you had no.
Will you get malchus? That's a separate question. You need a kazayis for malchus to be over, but lechatchila to have chatzi shir also in the Torah.
So you're not allowed to put it in your mouth,
Right.
or you're not allowed to swallow
You're
it.
not allowed to swallow it.
You're not allowed to swallow it.
For the main issue is swallowing it.
But the Isser is or not?
No, even if it's less, it's usher to eat. Malchus would apply only for kazayis.
The Isser flesh.
Yeah, okay,
So
right.
you had no other flesh.
Right, no other flesh there.
Then we made us.
It would remain usher, even if it's all minced up. And even if you have 1,000 times keneged, because it's discernible. There's nothing there to be mevatalet.
When you say malchus by kazai, you mean lashes.
Yeah,
Lashes.
because it's a lav.
So
Yeah.
it's in the form of penalty
Yeah.
that doesn't apply.
Right.
But the prohibition.
Right, it's not
applies.
chorus here, it's not chalev or something like that. Now, the Ramaz Shita and the other poskim hold, no. The Chiddush here, or the Halacha in Sif Aleph, in Siman Kuf Dalet, will be only applicable to Shratzim. So in repeating the Halacha again, just those words in that Halacha, that a piece nechtach lechatichos dakos vu binyan sheno yochol lesanano, you can't filter out, you go in shenis arav sheich or achoymes b'maychol av, in a very thick maychol, akol osir ve'ein sham bitol dechashin shemo yifga b'mamosher shel iser v'lo yagesh. He may come and eat and have the iser, and you may not even feel it, but you're going to be having it. So the Ramah says, "V'davka v'sheretz yishlochush im nishar sham shelo yuchal leotzio, aval b'shar isun en lochush." Wow, this halacha of minced meat, minced, completely shredded, in a tafshil which is av, that you cannot, it's not easily removable, because if it would be completely liquid, you would be able to filter it out. That's the easiest way to filter something out, right? You can put a napkin, you can put something, whatever. Very easily it will absorb any little thing. Liquid, it's easy. So we're talking about a tafshil av. But the Ramah says, no, this halacha that I agree with the Mechaber, I would only say that it applies to shratzim. But in Shari Surim, no, I don't have to worry about it. If I can't really filter it out, it's gone. It's bottled. I can't see it. As the Chochmah Sodom points out, he takes it one step further, the Chochmah Sodom, I believe. He says, if you can't see it at all, then you could be lenient. But if you can somewhat detect it, maybe you have to be machmer. So he distinguishes between totally invisible versus a little bit detectable. Interesting. But the basic halacha, the basic shita says that if it's somewhat discernible, that it's there, it's not completely disappeared, so I can't get it out, a bunch of small pieces all over the world, all over the place, like confetti. How are you going to, take it out? Very difficult. So it's bottle, if it's shari surim. According to the Ramah, this isser, that it's not bottle, is only applying to shrotzim. Why? Because by sheretz is a special isser from the Torah, that it's also beka'adosha, even the size of a lentil, not as ice, even the size of a lentil. Why? Because that's the shear of tumah by sheretz.
Aser Or that it's for it.
Yeah.
And different
Exactly. Everything else is bekazais, and here it would be
That would be
bekadosha.
lashes.
Yeah, it would be.
That is up.
It would be bekadosha. Sure, it's chatzishir is also too.
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
what I'm saying.
Here, the real isser would apply even on the size of a kadosha because it's equivalent to the shear of two, which is by a sheretz
real.
of what the Torah forbid. In other words,
But Chatzi should have Torah forbid.
yeah,
What's
but
the between?
it's but not on the same level, right? It's not on the same level. There's no malchus.
So you were saying
Right?
Malchus.
Sure, exactly. Yeah.
Because when you're saying
Yeah.
really forbid, then you mean Malchus.
Yeah. In other words, it's the real thing. It's the real thing. In other words, even a small size of a kadosha, that's the isser, only by shmona shrotzim, because that's the shear of tuma, and therefore, in this case, it's all minced up. We will agree with the mechaber that even though I can't filter it out, it's usher and there's no bittul, but not in shari surim. So that's a very, very big machlokes. If it were ever to happen, depending on what you're dealing that got minced up and totally shredded and it's difficult to remove, it would all depend. If it's shrotzim, everybody would agree. The Shach explains, however, that it's not what you were told. What were we told? We were told that Ramos Shita is because it's a form of birya. There was, what do we say by birya? That it's not batal afilu be'elef, right? Hashivas. This sheretz, minute piece of sheretz, a piece of the sheretz, is like a birya. Which means what? That even be'elef lo batal. So the Shach says, no, it's not exactly like a birya. And the Shach had to interject here because he anticipated the issue that the Taz brings up. Because how could you say this has anything to do with birya? We all learned before, not too long ago, that a birya that is cut up is not a birya. Okay, remember this? So this is a very important. The Taz goes at length in not agreeing with everybody except with the mechaber, right? Because, it's not a birya, and if it's not a birya, then it is batal. Right? Then it should be batal. Then why is it not? Not because of birya, but because it's discernible. Okay? In other words, so the Taz does agree that it's not batal, but don't tell me that it's not batal because of a birya. It has nothing to do with birya. It's cut up. Then why is it not batal? Because there's a special din called nikar, and as long as an isser somewhat is called nikar, it's not batal.
But the Mechaber would agree with him.
That's the mechaber. That's the mechaber. Whereas the Ramos says yes, but the Ramos says two things differently. He says that it only applies by shrotzim, this din, nikar, because it's like a birya. The Shach says no, not exactly. Don't say that. Otherwise you're going to upset the Taz. Don't say that. Just say that this is a gzera, a special gzera by shrotzim that shema yivgo b'mamosha. In other words, you're going to come and actually eat the mamasha of the Isur. So what? Well, the Torah forbids a kadosha too. You see what the Shach is saying? The Torah forbid, by the way, by shrotzim kadosha. So if you're going to not discern, if you're not going to be able to filter it out, you may be pogea b'mamasha shel Isur. So it has nothing to do exactly with birya. It resembles birya, but it's not exactly a birya. It's not.
What exactly is Basar?
A lentil, the size of a lentil.
Is that
With shrotzim, with certain insects or reptiles.
okay, so that's the size of Deish?
No. Adosho.
Adosh.
Ke'adosho. Ke'adosho. Adashim.
Okay.
Lentils, right? So this is one of the big issues in this Siman Kuf Dalet. The second issue is, of course, a continuation of Kuf Gimel about Nois in Tam Lev Gam. And Tam Lev Gam, of course, is something that is acceptable to us. We understand that. It's mutter. But sometimes it may be a little bit of a question whether something is poigim or not. And we don't want to try it out. And there's a machlokes in the Gemara about certain mice. Do all mice poigim a tafshil or only certain mice? Because there is a mice called an achber or the dabro, a field mouse. That is a delicacy. And because it's a delicacy, obviously then it's not mouse. If people eat it, how could you say it's moist? Even though, I don't see necessarily a connection. You could time it possibly. Well, people can eat it by itself, but it would be moist in the tafshel. Once you combine it in the tafshel, that's really the suffix here. It is oila shulchan melachim. Therefore, maybe it's not poigim. And what is not poigim? It's not poigim shecha v'choimetz. And as we explained, because beer and vinegar could be somehow are not affected by it, or if anything, because of the acidity, or because of the combination of the two, it actually enhances the flavor. There is those that say that maybe with these two particular ones, this achbar actually does not do anything to it. So there's a suffix, therefore, by these two liquids. And there's a suffix by achbaro de dabro, a field mouse, if it's really noisem tamlev gam at all. Right? We don't know. Because in Sif Beis it says, Im nofa leyain v'shemen or leshar mashkim poigim bevadai. In yain and shemen, wine and oil, or other liquids, it's poigim bevadai. Vein sorach samach levatloi. Now, we didn't clarify why is it poigim vadai. The Rambam explains that these things tzrichim liyos mevusomim. They have to smell good. Wine has to smell good. Oil, and therefore the Rashal learns from that Rambam the mashma metamze the shar mashkim asurim, because the Rambam says these have to be mevusomim. What about if it fell into Coca-Cola? Coca-Cola doesn't have to be mevusam. Would it be poigim? The Coca-Cola, the Mechaber says ole shar mashkim, but the Rashal doesn't agree. Not necessarily. Shar mashkim may be asurim. It's not poigim. And there are some who are machmir unless it's a hefsed meruba, like the Shitas who hold that, based on the way you read from the Rambam, that he says these have to be mevusamim, then maybe shar mashkim is asur. It's not poigim. Now, obviously, by sheichar and chometz, there's a suffix, and we pass him to be machmir. The Ramah doesn't argue on that. We have to be machmir on that. At least in those two.
When the Rambam talks
By achbar, that is by achbar of the muscle, we have a suffix. If it's mashbiach, sheichar and chometz, not the achbar of the dabra. According to Mechaber, it's nois and tam l'shvach, because it's ola shul shul. So, depending on what mouse you're talking about, that's also going to make a difference. But let's now, for all purposes, go along with the poiskim who are not nichalek, like the Mechaber. All mice are the same; they're all created equal, right? They are all poigim. We would have a question about sheichar. That's still going to be always a suffix by sheichar and chometz. But here, in Shar Mashkim, that the Mechaber is saying, that we see now from the Marshal that it's not necessarily so either. Marshal says, no. If we go by the Rambam, Shar Mashkim may be like Coca-Cola, whatever. It would not be poigim. Rambam says, dafke these, yain and shemen, because they need to be mevusamim. So, you have...
That's the question I'm asking. He talks about shemen. He's talking about shemen only from olives or all shemen?
Any oil, supposedly. Any
Oils
oil.
have all sorts of options.
Right.
Some of them...
May or may not, right.
Some today commercials.
Yeah.
No.
Right. Yeah, it could be a question in the Mitzias that you would have to determine that, ask a goy what he eats, maybe a kafela, right? But for the most part, we understand that it affects it too, because in the last Siman, when we talked about meat, remember about meat being poigim, shemen, and vash, and honey? Somehow it does something strange to it. It totally takes away the good, smooth taste of shemen and vash. So
That's why it was
shemen.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
cottonseed and safflower.
Right.
They make,
But he would be introducing a new that there are certain shemen where it does us.
You may want to be machmir, maybe. In certain cases, it could be. That's possible, because
do we
Mechaber makes it easy for us because he tells us shar mashkin. It's poigim vadai. So if you follow the Mechaber, you don't have a problem. But right, if you want to be choishish like the Marshal and others, then it could be that certain things it would not be poigim. You would want to be mach. And I think Primi Godin speaks about it. Do we consider this shita or not? Another mashkin, if it's not a hefset. And it comes down to that. If it's not a hefset or not, can we be soymech on the Mechaber, or should we be machmir? You could be soymech on the Mechaber. He's the boss here. He's the main author here. We follow him in. So anyway, that was the question of Pegimis. That was the question of Shar Mashkim. That was the difference between the various Achbaro, even though some do not make a distinction. Some say all mice are the same. And a mice, because it's mos, in other words, even though it's it's not because it's mos, even though it's oila shulchan shulchan and it's not mos, it's the combination of the it and the tafshil that it's poigim. It's a fact that this kind of meat in the tafshil will make a pgima. So it's not really so much of an issue of is it mouse or not? Because maybe it's not mouse. In Louisiana, they have possums, right? As we said, they eat these things. They add there's all kinds of rodents that are eaten, that would be a delicacy in some places. So it's not so much whether it is or not mouse. It is poigim the tafshil. So if a mouse is poigim the tafshil, it's going to be poigim most of the time, unless of course we have a suffix from the Gemara.
It's not poking because of.
In itself, it's going to be one of those that it may be poigim the tafshil because of the combination of the two.
Just the concept of.
Yeah, in itself may not be poigim. People will eat it. They don't mind. You know that there is a dish in China made out of minced rat with vegetables, deep fried and everything. Rats, small little pieces. You see it. There's pictures of it. You can see it on the internet.
Do they serve it on the side?
But
They have to deal with the permission.
I know Cambodia is exporting rats to Vietnam. They were short on rats and tons of rats that they caught for them. That's what people eat when they're hungry in these places, and especially the poor, and they don't seem to mind. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, let's go on.
You see, a mouse tastes. Well, they say on the internet.
Oh yeah.
Mice taste chicken.
Well, it depends who you ask. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's go on to the next halacha, and that was Shuman. What about Shuman? We just finished saying that if it falls into Shar Mashkim according to the Bechaber, it's Poigim Vadai, and you don't need Samach Levato Plitosai, because that's what Poigim Vadai means. You don't need Shitu Mevato Plita. Right? So we have a situation here that a mouse fell into, not Sheikha or Chometz, it fell into the wine. You're making a lot of wine. You took it out, and now you have to be concerned about it. You're not going to tell anybody, because if you do, they're not going to want to have it. But you don't want to wait. You don't want to throw it away. There's plita. There may be plita. What is emitted, the flavor, right? So, do you have to concern with yourself with it? The answer is no. Ein tzorich shishim levatel plitoso, because it's pogum. Great. I see it. I have to remove it. I have to remove the mouse, right? But I don't have to be concerned with the plita. I don't need even shishim. There's always even. I don't need anything. It's pogum. With the plita. Plita is not be'ain, right? No problem. It's pogum. Whatever is there. Whatever plita is there. However, even though the Mechaber said this applies even to Shar Mashkim, the Ramah says as follows: Ulefi zein nofal shuman. If it fell into fat, in the olden days they used to use fats for cooking oil, schmaltz as it was called. So people had shuman around their homes. People used to cook it up, liquefy it. It would solidify after a while, just like yoch. Yoch, you know what yoch is? The fish yoch. Haven't you seen gefilte fish? Put it away in the refrigerator and it solidifies. It gels. It's called yoch. Yeah, yeah. The jelly. So, im nofal shuman. If the akbar fell into shuman is shar mashkim. Na medina hochi, right? That's one shita. The same din would apply. It's poigim. V'yesh machmirim. I believe that's the rosh. Are machmirim b'shuman. Afilu mukosher lefaninu. Even if it's solid and hard before us, some say that it's a problem with shuman. It's not shuman. It's not yain or shemen. So some say therefore you have to concern yourself with shuman. And therefore, listen to the following. There's two scenarios in the Ramah, 2 or 3. The Ramah says like this: Yesh machmir b'shum afilu imu kosher lefoneno. Even if we see that the shuman is hard right now. Hard, that means maybe it wasn't kavush. It was not there for a while. Even though right now it's kosher lefoneno. If what happened, as long as I know, they poured on a daily basis into this pot. I don't know when the mouse fell in, but I know they've been pouring hot shuman into this pot. So what's my suffix? Maybe the akbar was already down there when they were pouring over it. And since they poured every day, every little bit of shuman got in touch with the akbar, because it all melts, it all comes in touch, and as the Pri Chodesh says, it's a form of chanan. Or according to others, it's one klipa after one klipa accumulating if you hold that only a klipa is becoming osir. So however you look at it, if you've been pouring hot shuman and you don't know when the achbar fell in, the whole shuman will be osir, unless you have enough against it, of course. Afilu mir shishim b'shuman neged kol achbar, because it's a form of chanan. But im lo iru olav, but if you did not pour, you never did pour. Or she'iru olav v'yodua shelo hoyo shama achbar keshe'iru olav, but you know the mouse wasn't there when you poured. If the shuman ba lefanenu kishu kosher, and the shuman comes now when it's hard, or if you find if you find the mouse on top of the shuman, sagale ben netilas mokum, it's enough to take off a netilas mokum a little bit. The lo machzikin an iser, we're not going to say chazaka of an iser shema hoyo shuman rach keshenofal sham, that maybe the shuman was soft when it fell in there. The kovash avekem mebushel. We're not going to suspect that. In other words, you know you didn't pour. Now it's hard. Okay? To suspect that the achbar fell in there when it was soft and it was kavush there all this time? No. Why not? Because it's mutar mikoch spek sveika, the Ramah says. We don't have to suspect the worst. You understand what's the worst here? The worst is, even though you're bringing it to me in a solid state, you know you didn't pour on top of it. No, but maybe it was there all the time and it was kavush. Ramah says I have a svek sveika. What's the svek sveika? Safek nafal sham kishayo kosher. There's a safek, maybe it fell there when it was hard, not when it was soft. And if you want to tell me there is a chance it did fall when it was liquid, soft, maybe it solidified before 24 hours or before the shear of kvish, which would be a meis leis in this case. Maybe it solidified within 3-4 hours. So it was never kavush. Kavush means that it would have to be immersed in the liquid or in the brine or whatever it is for a certain amount of time. So you see the svek of the Ramah here? If you bring it to me in a solid state, it's hard now, the shuman, and you know you didn't pour everyday shuman, I'm not going to be machzik iser. In other words, I'm not going to think the worst. That it was there all along when it was in the liquid form and it was there 24 hours. Nah. I have a svek sveika, right? Safek, maybe it fell there when it was already hardened. Okay? And even if you tell me it fell there when it was soft, maybe it hardened before it became kavush. That's what the Mechaber wants to say.
No.
The Ramah wants to say.
If you did it with the pouring, with each pour,
the shisha wouldn't help.
Wouldn't help you.
Wouldn't help, because it's like everything is touching the mouse. Everything is coming in touch with the mouse. When you pour, the whole shuman liquefies again, as I think Pri Chodesh explains, and it comes in touch with the achbar again, always touching us. It's all becoming us all the time. Yeah. Now, some have a problem with this svek sveika because it's not a real svek sveika, because it's all mishem echol. When we learn the halachas with the details of svek sveika, we will see that you can't have a svek sveika; it won't work. It's mishem echol from one name. This is really not a double suffix; it's one. Because what are we saying? The suffix really is: was it kavush or not? In other words, it's not a real svek sveika, because ultimately we are determining. If you say, well, maybe it was hard. Or even if it was soft, maybe it hardened before it became kavush. It's all the same thing in a sense. It means that we have a suffix whether it was kavush or not. So some don't want to say that it's a real svek sveika. Why is the Ramah Mekel here? So he brings down in the Torah's Chatas because there's another suffix here. There's another deis that hold that achbar is poigim in shuman. Remember that? That's the first shita that he brings. Since achbar maybe according to some is poigim in shuman also, we can be lenient here if we have room for such a svek sveika. But if you look at the shach, very interesting shach. If you only have one suffix in an achbar, if it's nichbash or not, if it's really only one suffix, it's osur. Why? Because kavush is doraisa. So it's one suffix, it's a suffix doraisa, and we go lechumra. The shach, however, asks, why can't we introduce an additional suffix? And what would be the additional suffix if achbar is mashbiach or poigim altogether? Why don't you introduce that kind of a suffix if the achbar is mashbiach or poigim? So he says that suffix of if an achbar is mashpiach or poigem is a suffix in the Gemara. We can't use the suffix. If the Gemara had the suffix, we can't be mitzvah of that suffix to our sfeikas. And it's a form, like the Nekudas HaKesef explains, it's really more of a suffix in Chisoron Yediyah. Remember that term, Chisoron Yediyah? That we don't know? If we don't know, you can't use the suffix. Figure it out. Just because you don't know, you can't apply that suffix.
That was a region.
Right, and then there's, in Chisoron Yediyah, there's also machlekes what's Chisoron Yediyah. So that's why you can't really use that suffix of the Gemara if a achbar is poigim or not. Ubemokom shashumen mous lechol. The Ramah adds one more halacha before we get into the other halachas. I just want to finish the Ramah. Ubemokom shashumen mous. Anytime we're dealing with shuman that is mous lechol, the shuman is mous lechol to eat. For whatever reason, it became mous. Also ladliko gamkin beis hakneses. It tells us an additional halacha that you can't use it to light in shul. You know how it would light the candles. You can't use that to light in the shul. There's a pasuk that says, the Navi says, would you bring this to your prince as a gift? Then how dare you bring this to Hashem?
Use that oil.
You should not. It's not. Oh yeah. If you want to polish your shoes.
No. You can't make the list.
He's saying specifically for those things, right?
Right. So what about Hanukkah list?
Also not. Oh, I'm sorry. Also not. Very good point. Oh, very good. Or any other thing that would be a form of mitzvah or kedusha. That's right. That's true. That would.
So,
I believe that the place can talk about that too.
So Hanukkah, we say really anyways, it's better to use olive oil.
Yeah, but not a double mose
be
because
part
that. Yeah, so he's right.
Shabbos, no?
Right, he's right. So I don't know if they say it over here. Yeah.
Because you break down for one, and then
Let me see. They talk about it here. Yeah. All he adds is b'mokum hefsed godol yesh lismoch adibra mekilim. That's all he adds. They said if there is if it's a big hefsed, you can be soymech on the ones who are mekel. And what that means, going back to the original din, that you can be soymech to be mekel on that it's poigim shar mashkim chutz mishecher b'choymetz. Yeah. So I think you're right. It would apply to all those situations where mitzvah is involved. Okay, the last halacha, the last seif is an important seif that we need to elaborate a little bit more on. Dvorim hameusim shenafsho shel odom kotza bohem kenemolim uzvuvim v'yitushim. We spoke a little bit about it in the previous Siman. Things that are totally disgusting to human beings, to most human beings. Some people, like in the Philippines and in China, they eat all kinds of things. So dvorim hameusim shenafsho shel odom kotza kenemolim uzvuvim v'yitushim. And he lists over here ants, flies, and fleas, or other kinds of insects. It's interesting, he says kol odom, because he means the majority of people are boidel. In other words, they stay apart from them because they're so disgusting. Even if they got mixed in the tafshun, they were completely dissolved. Well, dissolved is not the right word. Nimcha means completely crushed, perhaps, into the tafshul. Ima heter, Rabba, if there's more heter, Rabba, in other words, more, not shishim, mutorim, it's mutter, even though it's a whole birya, and it's not missing a leg, necessarily. Even though when it says nimche gufon atoicha, it does not necessarily mean that it was completely, disfigured. It just means that it's entirely intact. The whole birya is intact inside. But it's one of these things that is completely mosed to everybody. Special class of insects that they're completely mosed to everybody. So in the heter Rabbalov motor mikol makom kol she'ashaliv the gulav b'misaneres borik misaneres. Obviously, if you could in any way possible filter them out, you need to filter them out. Miu bechalo b'shichro, in vinegar and beer yeshlochosh kemo be'achma, we should be as concerned as with an achma. Okay, fine. That's the Beis Yosef according to the Rashba, that with beer and vinegar, maybe we always have to be concerned, even with these kinds of creatures. All right. But this is an interesting halacha here. And in some way it explains the Ramah, we said last time. The Ramah that said, unless a beer is pogum atzmoy, remember, if you remember that Ramah said something that not everybody necessarily agreed with literally. He seems to be implying that if a beer is pogum atzmoy, then it is bottle. Because he told us by the halachas of birya that even though the birya will be poigim the tafshil, it's not about the bell if it's a birya. But the Ramah says, but unless it's poigim me'atzmo. So the Aruch HaShulchan and everybody understand. A lot of poskim understood that the Ramah was saying, yeah, maybe he's referring to this seif in Kuf Daled. Pogum me'atzmoi means that if in itself this creature is pogum, then even if it's a birya, it will be batal b'roiv. The halachas of birya will not apply to it. Everybody says, "What are you learning from?" Right? And what do you mean? What are you learning from? You learn from here. They want to say that what he means pogum me'atzmoi is that it's completely nisrach, unless it's pogum by itself, not in its nature, but it's pogum because it became rotten. Then, of course, it loses the chashivas, its importance. But who is to say that pogum me'atzmoi means this necessarily? Here, obviously, he's talking about a separate group of shratzim. And it was specifically, not that it doesn't necessarily mean everything. Certain ones, nemalim zvurim yetushim, that are most, v'nimcha gufan l'toichan. And someone is saying, nimcha gufan l'toichan, by the way, means that it's no longer a birya. If that's the case, what's the chiddush of this halacha then? If the mechaber is trying to tell us that nimcha gufan l'toichan really means it's cut up, then there's no chiddushes. We know that from before. There must be another chiddush here. That's why I have a problem with those other meforshim that say, no, the Ramah can't mean this, because perhaps nimcha gufan l'toichan means that it's shattered completely. It's not a birya. If that's the case, then what's the chiddush? The mechaber already told it. We already know this from before. Just because they're mos, I mean, so what? If nimcha means they're shattered, they're shattered. I don't need them to be mos. So I was trying to explain that that's the chiddush here, is that even if they retain their shape, nimcha gufan l'toichan means that their whole thing is in there. In other words, the whole mamashas iser is in there, right? Still, in my head to Rabbalav, it's mutter because it's a davar shemos shenafsho shalado kotzo b'hem. So he mentions nemonim zvuvim yutushim. What are you going to say about worms? He doesn't say worms. Tequila. Remember tequila? What about a worm? So I saw in the Gilyon of Marsha, he brings down the name of the Shach. If you look at the Hilchos Toloim in Pei Daled, you will see that the Shach speaks about Toloim, that Toloim are not considered poigmim. We don't have such a tradition. It's not a real pegima. Nothing really is felt. Bais Yosef actually says about flies, by the way, that flies give off nothing. In other words, there's no plita at all. I think he says that by flies. By the gabe plita, that is. So Toloim are not poigim. Gilyon Marsha says, based on what the Shach says over there, that Toloim are not poigmim. And therefore, what does that mean? That you would need shishim connect them, since they're not poigim. So it's a nafkamina lemaisa. We gotta know this. Toloim got mixed in. There's Toloim. Worms. You need shishim. There's a big machloikas about a certain worm in fish. If you can have the fish or not, and it's hard to remove. You don't see it. Depends. The big chiluk over there is, where is the worm coming from? Is it coming from the ocean and entering the fish, or is it growing in the fish? That's really what's going to make the big difference. I hope they're able to resolve it soon. There's a lot of poskim who are machmer, and there's some who are lenient because the exactly, we have always, because
changed the truth.
Yeah, well,
with respect to this particular worm, they didn't know that it was outside.
Yeah, they don't know for sure. There's still, I guess, some tests are still needed. It appears to be, from where it is being found, for the most part, there's a good chance that it just developed inside. Perhaps it swallowed the eggs, or so. I mean, the worm did not necessarily come in unless you find it. The problem is, what do you do if you find it in the stomach? So the thing is, well, maybe from the stomach it means it can crawl. Does it crawl to other parts of the fish? Does it have the ability to crawl from one place to another place? Therefore, if you find it once in the stomach and once somewhere else, if you say it's the same worm and not a different species, right, then you see that it could have come from the outside, even though you found it elsewhere. So there's a lot of sdodim to this machlokes. But anyway, maybe they'll figure this out soon. So in the Gilyon Marsha, he therefore says that based on that shach, Toloim don't have ipgima, you would need shishim negdam if you would have that kind of a situation where you have toloim. The Taz considers toloim also as meusim, just like the rest of them. Even though the Mechaber doesn't mention them here, he would consider toloim just as much meusim, like nemolim, like ants. And the Mishpatzes Zov and the Minchas Yaakov, I think, Paskin like that too. That would apply to toloim too. So halacha lemaaseh, what do we do by flies and ants? We hold that they're bottle berov like the Mechaber. You don't need shishim because they're pugumim, and that's also the way the Taz and the Prichodosh Paskin and the Gra also brings down that way, but not in Sheikha and Choyvetz. But I think the Shach is the only one that says that you have to be machmer unless it's in Hefse Meruba. In other words, he doesn't go along with this halacha so easily. Because here he says, what's the Chiddush according to the Shach? The Chiddush here is, afilu afal pi sheyesh bo kazayis b'chtei achilas pras, it's mutter. That's what he brings down in the name of the Rashba. Yeah. Alright, so for the most part, most of the poskim are makel over here. Okay, just to go back on another little detail that I found very interesting. There was an interesting Pischei Tshuva that asks, by the Achbar and the Shuman, why don't we say that there's a chazaka, cheskas kashers, on the Shuman? He says like this: even if the Achbar fell into the Shuman that was soft, maybe it didn't die right away. So keep the Shuman becheskas kashers. You know, when we're talking about chazaka, it means status quo, whatever was there before. So he says very interesting. The Pischei Tshuva brings down a machlokes, I think Chasam Sofer and others, whether there's a plita from a live animal or not. Chasam Sofer says, you know what? Live animals give off plita too. If that's the case, it wouldn't make a difference if it didn't die right away. If you hold that there's a plita from a live animal that fell in, then you took out, didn't die right away, then it wouldn't make a difference. And some hold, of course, that there's no plita min achai. I think the Pischei Tshuva, that's the way he holds. He goes, no, we don't have a tradition that was plita from the chai. From a mace, yeah, but not from a chai. So that's a very interesting distinction too. Another detail I saw in the Isser V'Heter, he brings down that if they found the achbar in a shuman kosher, it was hard, that maybe we should leave the shuman b'chasako, that it's mutter, even if you say that it fell when it was soft, because there's a suffix when it hardened. And therefore, what should we say? We should leave it in the chazaka that the shuman was the way we have it right now, the way we found it. So as we explained before, that's not a good suffix, that's not a good chazaka. We can't say that because, as the Shach and Taz point out, the suffix kobush is the raisa, so that wouldn't work. In other words, if we have a suffix of when it hardened, that wouldn't help us because it's a suffix kovush. When we're dealing with kovush, as we will see in the next siman, it's a deraisa issue. So that will not help us either. Yeah, the only difference that I found between zvuvim and the rest of them is, like I told you, the Beis Yosef says that zvuvim don't give off taste. Flies don't give off taste. And this can make a difference, by the way, in whiskeys. There's a question in the poskim about whiskey. Whiskey's a davar charif. It's sharp. Maybe things are a little bit different with whiskey, as we had with sheikhar, with whiskey and with beer and vinegar. So there may be some differences with other liquids, but we, for the most part, follow the mechaber as shar mashkim. These things are poigim. And as far as tam, the Beis Yosef adds that zvuvim don't give off tam. That's pretty much the siman kuf dalad. The main thing to remember is that whenever you do have this kind of a situation that can come up once in a while of all kinds of spiders, or all kinds of things falling in, you don't really have to be concerned so much about the plita because usually it's very, very small in comparison to the of a tafshel, the plita. It's be'ain, so you have to remove it anyway. You wouldn't want to eat it anyway, but right. The question whether if you remove it, you're going to have the soup, that's up to you. You know?
Spider soup.
Yeah, spider soup. Shabbos, you have to, the minig is to remove the fly, the ant, with a little bit of the liquid, so you shouldn't be boired, right? If that ever happens, then it happens. If it happens in the kitchen, the pot, don't tell anybody. They're not going to want to eat it, right? But it's not a problem. You don't have to be concerned with this, because even if you have a question of whether, there's shishim or not, most likely there's roiv. And all these things that are most even if you've got mixed and you can't take it out, in maheter rabbalov it's mutter.
It just needs roiv.
You're just going to need roiv anyway. So that's what is important to remember. Are you going to have it or not? That's again, it's a separate. I think the caterer is going to have a problem more than we have, because we may not want to eat it if it's in a small bowl and you can't find it. Just throw away the whole thing. Go look for it. Yeah, but if it's a big tafshel, then obviously we need to know the halachas. And if it's a big tafshel anyway, you have much more. It's a birya. No, even if it's a birya, but it's mos be'atzmon.
So that's what's important to remember, that the maos is over.
According to this last halacha, mos be'atzmon overrides it. Even though some would argue that here it says nimcha gufan letoicha. We actually do have that situation that sometimes if you have a suffix, if it's cut up or not, whether it fell in or not, then you may have a sex faker. But here we saw it fall in, you only really have one suffix. But if it's mos, it's not a problem anyway. Especially if it's one of these things, it would definitely not be a problem. So in some situations, of course, because of certain liquids, there may be a question. It's questionable whether they're poigim or not. At least we know that the achronim say that you can be making behefsed meruba. So that too, because what do we see so far? That there are situations where we may have a suffix whether something is poigim or not. Mouse, we saw that there are certain liquids, depending how you learn which. If you follow the Rosh in Shuman, if you follow the Ran or the Rash, but depending on how you learn the Rambam, what do we do with Shar Mashkim with this mouse? Is it poigim or not? You can always resort to the Hefsed Meruba Kula that they bring in relying on those that say that it is poigim al mashkim. Rely on those that say they don't distinguish between the rodents, even if it's Ola Shulchan Aruch. That something that is mos, something that is a kind of a rat, and regardless of the mashke, it's poigim the mashke. Obviously, but if you have a different problem, it's completely minced up, right? Completely minced up, and you cannot be misanan it, then you may have a separate problem. In other words, it's that it in itself may not be bottle. It in itself, even though it's poigim the tavshel, but that's after I removed it. If it's there, unless it's the last seif that we had, that it's most completely, a mouse is not one of them. So a mice being cut up in the machine would not be bottled, neither according to the mechaber or according to the Ramah, for different reasons. If it's nicker, as we said before, but if there's other flesh, other meats, or things like that are similar to it, then of course you have a din of yavish b'yavish. But if all you have is a beer or some tafshil that is very thick, and the mouse is in there, cut up into pieces, that's an important halacha. It's not going to be bottled afilu be'elef alafim. Either like the mechaber, in the way the Taz learns, because it's nicker, or like the Ramah, that by shrotzim, by the shmoyne shrotzim, an adosha is asur. It's a form of, either it's because like a birya, or like the shaklan, it's not necessarily because of birya, but because you may come to eat from it. So the Torah was machmir on it. So here it's interesting. We learn on one hand that mos is bottle, pogum is bottle, right? But unless it's one of these things that are mentioned here in the molim zuvim yutushim, it's not going to be bottle. The only way it can be bottle, nevertheless, is if there is other meat just like it, where it could be bottle yavish b'yavish. Then you don't have to worry about the tam, because the tam will be pogum anyway for most things. But it itself, if it's still nicker, will not be bottle. So if it's flies, if it's nemolim, yutushim, and according to some even toiloim, you may not have to be concerned with it. With the tam, for sure not. But of course, if something is infested, we learned that you can't have it. If you realize that it's infested, you're not allowed to have it, even though you don't see it. Medina, you cannot have it, because just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's okay. It's infested, it has a chazaka. The only thing is that if there's a taruvos, then of course it may make a difference. In taruvos, of course, there's the name of bitulim. It in itself, however, I can't necessarily have, because even if it's a davar that's poigem, I still need a roiv, right? Remember that from last Siman? I still need a roiv if something is pogum. Unless, of course, it's completely rotten and completely lost its taste, dry, in medication, things like that, then you may be able to have it. But otherwise, the only way it's mutter is betaruvis. The only leniency is that if it's pogum or pogum the tafshel, that it could be bottled beroiv and you don't need shit. Okay, we'll stop over here.